What's up, Worldwide Fam? It's your man Omar S for the West Coast Wave on Library and for YouTube. This is from fastcompany.com, dated 9/14/2020. Today's September 16. It's 4:06 p.m. West Coast. We were shocked. RAND study uncovers massive income shift to the top 1%. The median worker should be making as much as $102,000 annually if some $2.5 trillion wasn't being reverse distributed every year from the working class. This is by Rick Wartzman. 6-minute read. Let's see. Just how far has the working class been left behind by the winner-take-all economy? A new analysis by the RAND Corporation examines what rising inequality has cost Americans in lost income as the results are stunning. Sorry, let's do that again, dear reader. Right there. A new analysis by the RAND Corporation examines what rising inequality has cost Americans in lost income, and the results are stunning. We'll see if RAND doesn't delete this like they did their study on how crime around pot shops lowers. Alright, so a full-time worker whose taxable income is at the median, with half the population making more and half making less, now pulls in about $50,000 per year. Yet, had the fruits of the nation's economic output been shared over the past 45 years as broadly as they were from the end of World War II until the early 1970s, that worker would instead be making $92,000 to $102,000. The exact figures vary slightly depending on how inflation is calculated. The findings, which land amid a global pandemic, help to illuminate the paradoxes of an economy in which so-called essential workers are struggling to make ends meet while the rich keep getting richer. We were shocked by the numbers, said Nick Hananur, maybe, a venture capitalist who came up with the idea for the research along with David Rolfe, founder of Local 775 of the Service Employees International Union and president of the Fair Work Center in Seattle. It explains almost everything. It explains why people are so pissed off. It explains why they are so economically precarious. Take a look at that. Trends in income from 1975 to 2008. The chart is Carter C. Price and Catherine Edwards from the RAND Corporation. In 1975, 25% made $28,000. 2018, 25%, $33,000. Let's take a look down here. The top 1%, $289,000 in 1975, and in 2018 they're making $1,384,000. I'm sorry, $1,384,000. The median in 1975 was $42,000. In 2018, it's $50,000. So the wages are stagnant, as you see. All right. So the 2.5 trillion theft. Notably, it isn't just those in the middle who've been hit. RAND found that full-time prime age workers in the 25th percentile of the U.S. income distribution would be making $61,000 instead of $33,000 had everyone's earnings from 1975 to 2018 expanded, roughly in line with gross domestic product as they did during the 1950s and 60s. Workers in the 75th percentile would be at $126,000 instead of $81,000. Remarkably, even those in the 90th percentile would be better off than they are now if economic growth had been shared as it was in the post-war era. They'd be making $168,000 rather than $133,000. Tally it all up, according to RAND, and the bottom 90% of American workers would be bringing home an additional $2.5 trillion in total annual income if economic gains were as equitably divided as they'd been in the past, leading Rolfe to dub the phenomenon the $2.5 trillion theft. From the standpoint of people who have worked hard and played by the rules and yet are participating far less in economic growth than Americans did a generation ago, he says, whether you call it reverse distribution or theft, it demands to be called something. The RAND data also makes clear who the winners from inequality are, those in the top 1%. Of course, they'd be in a less advantageous position if the economic pie had been divvied up since the 1970s, since the mid-1970s, like it was previously. If that were the case, RAND says yearly income for the average 1%er would fall from about 1.2 million to $549,000. Although he himself is a self-described zillionaire, Hanauer is an outspoken critic of the gulf between the rich and everyone else. He thinks and writes and agitates on these issues all the time, but even he was surprised by Rand's findings. In fact, he says that before the report was completed, he had done his own back-of-the-envelope math and wound up underestimating by a good 40% the degree to which workers' incomes have failed to keep pace with gross domestic product. It's startling, he says. Rand crushed the data in all sorts of ways, and the basic pattern held true for part-time workers, entire families, men and women, blacks and whites, urban dwellers and rural residents, and those with high school degrees and those with college diplomas. There's no way of slicing the numbers where people come out ahead, says Carter Price, a senior mathematician at RAND who co-authored the study with his colleague Catherine Edwards, and an economist. I'm sorry. I was surprised about the magnitude of this. Price acknowledges that one weakness in the model is that it doesn't reflect people's total compensation, including the value of employer-provided health benefits. Alright, where was I? Somewhere right here, I think, dear reader. I just had to pause it, but we'll read that. Price acknowledges that one weakness in the model is that it doesn't reflect people's total compensation, including the value of employer-provided health benefits. Oh yeah, I did read that. All right, so it also does not include monies received from government transfer programs such as Social Security. It doesn't count rental income, dividends, and interest, and it takes into account capital gains, but due to certain technical constraints, only for those above the 90th percentile. However, these proceeds from the sale of the property are an investment amount to just 2% of income for the bottom 99% of households, the authors say. This wrinkle doesn't meaningfully change any of their conclusions. Indeed, for the vast majority of Americans, what they earn at work through hourly wages or salary represents practically all of their income, and that is fully captured in the study. The right shop for the research. It was no accident that the Fair Work Center commissioned RAND to look at the impact of inequality. Although a number of organizations conduct rigorous research on the topic, some of them, such as the Economic Policy Institute and the Center for American Progress, are identified as liberal. RAND is generally viewed as being among the least partisan shops out there, taken seriously by the right and the left. Hanauer notes, "We wanted to do it in a way that would at least make it harder for the people who want to believe this is all just whining to dismiss the data," he says. The approach that Price and Edwards took marks a breakthrough. The Economic Policy Institute has created a tool that shows that had U.S. workers' wage over the past 3 decades kept up with increases in productivity as they did in the 3 decades following World War II, someone making around $50,000 today would instead be making more than $70,000. But until now, nobody has teased out the bottom line effects to individuals and their families of how economic growth is being shared across the income spectrum, thereby turning what can be an abstract concept into something much more tangible. "I have not seen anything like this," says Ben Alinsky, the Senior Vice President of Policy and Strategy at the Center for American Progress, who got an advanced peek at the RAND study. "It's quite dramatic." Where the blame lies. Price and Edwards didn't comment on what might be causing inequality, saying that additional work is needed in this area, but Hanauer and Rolfe had no hesitation singling out the culprits. They say the blame lies, in large measure, with decades of failed federal policy decisions allowing the minimum wage to deteriorate over time, coverage to dwindle, and the effectiveness of the labor law to decline, undermining union power. They also cite a shift in corporate culture that has elevated the interests of shareholders over those of workers, and ethos that took root 50 years ago this week with the publication of an essay by University of Chicago economist Milton Friedman. Many of these developments, Rolf points out, have been driven by the belief that an unfettered free market would generate wealth for everyone. Thanks to the RAND study, he says, we now have the proof that this theory was wrong. As the 2020 election nears, Alinsky says the report may well make it tougher to pit the poorest Americans against the middle class, as some politicians are wont to do, because it crystallizes that everybody outside the top 1% has not fared well financially when compared with what would have been expected historically. This really is the entire country versus a very small number of people, Alinsky says. The other seismic political implication of the RAND report is that any modest proposal to democratize prosperity is bound to seem inadequate, given the gap that the study has brought to light. Rolf says, anything but the boldest of actions will look like a drop in the ocean. Hanauer agrees. I want Joe Biden and Donald Trump to have their wrestle with this, he says, adding that they should look at their constituents in the eye and explain, here's what I'm going to do to get you from the 50,000 you make today to the 100,000 you deserve. If you're not addressing the problem at that scale, Hanauer asserts, then you're not addressing the problem. You're just pretending. About the author, Rick Wartzman is head of the K.H. Moon Center for Functioning Society at the Drucker Institute and author of 4 books, including his latest, The End of Loyalty, The Rise and Fall of Good Jobs in America. You can follow him at R. Wartzman. It's probably on Twitter. Let me know what you think of this, dear reader. Thank you again for tuning in. RAND study uncovers massive income shift to the top 1%. Nothing new, but this is now some facts that you can show people.